You and I both have infertility stories. Our stories are very different.
Adoption was always going to be a part of our journey. It was part of our plan, but it just became kind of the priority in the plan.
Everyone's not meant to adopt, obviously.
For everybody, being a parent means something different. Adoption truly is the lifelong commitment of helping someone peel back the layers of who they are.
It's never the Disney story that we think it's going to be. Anna, I've had such a fun time reading your guide. Isaac, I don't know, at least several months ago, if not a year or more ago, Isaac brought it to me to say, read this, what do you think? And it's been so fun to kind of get the inside scoop on that. It's been fun to see that you and I both have infertility stories, adoption after infertility stories. Our stories are very different, but as I read your guide, just the exact same emotions all throughout. And it's just, for me, kind of felt like a bonding experience before even meeting you to just know that I wasn't crazy or to know that, these are similar emotions and feelings that people have going through that. So it's fun to read. I'm very excited. We know that you've struggled with infertility. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about that and uh, why you chose the adoption route. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think adoption was always going to be a part of our journey and a part of our family building story. So I am a social worker by training and education by heart. I am a social worker through and through, and I have had the opportunity to bring together so many families. That has been my work for so many years and my life's work. I even have a paper that I wrote in sixth grade where I said, I'm going to be a social worker. So it's just always what I knew I would do, what I would do to protect kids and create family. And so my husband and I, we met later in life. And when we did, we knew we wanted to adopt. We knew we wanted that to be part of our story. And we also wanted the experience of having biological children. So we knew it was going to happen. We didn't know the order of things. And so then when we got to the point in our marriage that we were looking to build our family and came into the experience of infertility and really realized that adoption was our only method of family building, it was part of our plan, but it just became kind of the priority in the plan. And so we first were foster parents for a period of time. And then we realized that foster care is temporary. It is not meant for kids to remain in foster care or be adopted from foster care. They're meant to go home. And so with that in mind, we knew that we really wanted the permanency of adoption. So at that point, we got connected with a private adoption agency and moved forward from there.
It's a great story. It's so interesting to me that how often you hear people say, even before they knew that there were going to be any issues, we just always knew that we were going to adopt. My husband and I say the same thing. We really didn't have conversations about it. We just kind of knew.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's what was going to happen. My daughter says that now about her and her husband. They don't know what, they're young, they're newly married, just 2 years in. So they don't know what's going to happen. But I find it interesting, first of all, that whether you call it calling in life or whatever, everyone's not meant to adopt, obviously.
Yeah.
You come into this knowing the good, the bad, and the ugly. Like, it's your profession.
Sure.
You know what happens. I look at my daughter. She says that, not knowing what's going to happen. She has certainly seen some wonderful sides of adoption and some ugly sides of adoption. But I definitely feel like that's just kind of proof or pointing to the fact that it is a calling in life.
Absolutely.
I say that not everyone is meant to, not everyone should be an adoptive parent. Yeah.
No, I definitely think that there is something divine
Mhm.
in adoption in that space. I do think that, like you said, not everyone is created for that. And that's one of the things I highlighted in the practical guide is helping families really think through that. Yes, you may want to have a family and have children. And for everybody, being a parent means something different. For some people, being a parent, being a mom means biology. And for others, being a mom means loving someone beyond myself. And so it's really understanding where you are in that so that you're able to determine if this is the right path. It's not something you can enter into with a maybe. You know that it's got to be something that you're fully committed to because adoption truly is the lifelong commitment of helping someone peel back the layers of who they are. And that's amazing and that's a privilege. But it is also a big responsibility.
Yeah, lifelong. I like that you
Yeah.
say that. Um, Whether it's my adoptive children or my bio children, but I just was having this conversation the other day. It's like, there's some parents who feel like when you turn 18, like you're on your own now, that kind of thing. And while there's truth to that, we have never felt that way. And I don't know if that's part of the adoption calling or not, but like we're lifelong parents, and the whole attachment journey and everything is a cyclical, lifelong thing that we keep coming back to over and over
Yeah, it
again. And yeah,
is. And it looks different in different
yes,
phases of life. And I think even for us as moms,
hmm
and as moms who have, our babies have come to us through adoption, especially adoption after infertility, I think we go through those waves too, like you said, around attachment and letting go of what we thought it would be and leaning into what is, because I think that grief that we feel around it is pervasive. It doesn't just go away. It's not that when you bring a baby home or a child joins your family through adoption that suddenly those feelings of loss go away that were related to infertility. It continues, and it's really kind of riding those waves of really understanding your own narrative within that relationship
right,
and that connection with your
right,
your child.
right. And your own narrative, and also understanding there are multiple narratives within
Absolutely.
within your own individual situation.
Yeah.
We are finding as our oldest adopted child goes into adulthood, we've got birth parents, adopted parents, adopted child, and now something we'd never really considered before, but finding that there really is a story here, but the siblings,
Wow.
you know.
Yeah.
And so there are lots of narratives that come into play here.
There's so many
Yes.
things.
So,
And, for us, having a closed adoption, there are so many unknowns.
yeah.
And so I think that has been a part of our journey as well with the adopting after infertility,
Right.
is that all we hear about is open adoption and be prepared for open adoption. And then when we got into a circumstance where we had a closed adoption, there was this other layer of grief and loss that came in. So we had this layer of grief and loss around infertility, and we had gotten to a point of peace about that. And then we came into adoption with our hearts just ready to expand our family in this way, only to find that door was closed. And so then there was this other layer of grief and loss, of the unknown, and of the pieces of the story that we'll never have for Zola, and that we may never be able to access. And so I think that's another layer, like you said, this intersectional identity that forms for adoptive moms of and that was a part of it for me, of really understanding of, oh my goodness, now I was the other in the space because, okay, I'm experiencing infertility. So my experience of motherhood, I'm the other.
Yeah.
And now in the space of the other,
Right.
I'm the other of the other, so it was
Yeah.
always trying to find that place where I could fit in.
Yeah.
And just recognizing that every story, every part of this journey, is so nuanced. There's so many factors.
It's interesting because similar story. Like we thought we had two open adoptions. And then as both children became older for different reasons, they didn't like officially close. We're all social media friends. Everyone knows what's going on in everyone's lives, but there really wasn't contact between the children and the birth mothers. And that was a grieving process for me because I think that we're maternal, obviously, not I think, but we are maternal. And I think that we go into this, as you said, it's never the Disney story that we think it's going to be. I know I don't want to speak for you or other adoptive moms, but I went into it thinking if we handle this in the most healthy way, birth mom is going to thrive, adopted child is going to thrive. And then when birth mom is not in the place to be part of that, that whole, network of all of us working together to be healthy, I grieved that part, kind of thing. And maybe that was selfish of me, but I just, I wanted to be there. I wanted it to be, and that just was not what worked out in either of our situations. So, yeah.
And I had some similar feelings around, like you said, kind of feeling selfish.
Yeah.
And for me with the closed adoption, I just had this longing of but I want her to see that I'm doing well,
Right.
that I'm doing what I said I would do.
Yeah.
That I'm being the best mama I can
approval.
be. I wanted,
Yeah.
I wanted that approval. I wanted to hear her say, good job. You
Right.
did a good job.
Yeah, right,
And
yeah.
like you said, and my husband actually helped me kind of see, he's like, but would that be healthy for her? Would it be healthy for her? And having to grieve that I will never, I may never get that approval, was kind of added on top of this already kind of simmering, grief that kind of always exists. So it is, I will say this journey is just not only this deep exploration of love and how my heart can expand, but this deep exploration of self and who I am and how I define who I
Right.
am. So that has been a really interesting, hard, cool, experience of just exploring like who I have become within this story.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I will say our stories are a little different in that I did go on to have 3 biological children. So I have 2 adopted and 3 biological. Still having infertility issues throughout all of that. Our issue was, and it took us a long time to conceive, 7 years before we had our first biological child. But then within, well, it's a long conflict. 4 years before there was any conception, and then 3 years of just miscarriage after miscarriage after miscarriage. And that continued to happen between all of our children and never really have a real answer or anything. So there's a lot of grieving. You talked about the grieving of giving up that dream of having a biological child and then switching over to adoption, even though you know that no matter what happens, I want to adopt at some point.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about that grief, because that's a thing.
Yeah, that is a thing.
That's a thing.
And the thing with grief is a universal human experience. So we all at some point in our life continuum will run into grief around something. And I think in this journey with infertility, this was the first time that grief stood at my front door and knocked and was like, hey, girl. It was the first time. And so the grief was overwhelming. When I say it was like a tidal wave came and just washed me out, because it was so unexpected. It was just completely unexpected. With my type of infertility, it's one of those silent things. There were no symptoms. There was nothing that could say anything was wrong. And so it really... And we kind of heard the old wives' tale growing up. Well, if your mama had babies fine, then you'll have babies just fine. And as I came into this journey and learning that, of course, the things that we grew up, being told weren't true. And what was going on inside of my body, there was nothing that could tell me that. So there were things that were happening in my physical body that I wasn't even aware of. And so, it was the grief of the unknowing, the shame, because for me, growing up in the church and growing up in some very conservative Christian environments, that's what women do. They have babies. And if they can't do that, well, what did they do to make that happen to themselves?
So if you're a career woman, then... there's something wrong.
So you're wrong. You're just wrong either way. And so I think that was part of the grief too of the grief and the shame. I think sat hand in hand because it was kind of I'm feeling all these feelings of grief and loss, and I'm also so ashamed that this is what's happening to me.
Yeah, the shame. Oh my goodness. and what so crazy? Like why is that so shameful? But I just remember, that's why people won't announce pregnancies until they're past the first trimester. And I just always say, but why?
Yeah.
Like you have a miscarriage and you're just going to suffer in silence.
Yeah.
Like, why would you not want your community to surround you when you're going through something so horrific?
Exactly.
Why do we feel so shamed that we can't carry a baby to term, or that we can't conceive? It's absolutely ridiculous.
It is. And that is why I just kind of got on fire about, I am going to tell my story wherever I can, however I can, because I felt so alone. There was nobody around me sharing their story. And there certainly weren't many women who looked like me who were sharing that story. And so it was really important for me to speak up and say what was happening. So that other women would be aware that this is a thing. I didn't even know this was a thing. And so... the more I could tell my story, especially for Black women, that this does happen to us. This does happen to us, and it's very real. That was really important because it's very isolating. It can be very isolating.
No, that's fantastic. I think what you're doing is great. I remember my first miscarriage, so it had been 4 years, for us to conceive. So, of course, when we conceived, we were elated and we told everyone.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was just like,
Yeah.
"Oh,
Woo!
yeah." And then it ended in miscarriage pretty, quickly after that. And I was working at a school, and so we had told everyone, so I sent an email. I don't know, probably not email because we weren't emailing that much at that point, but I contacted my boss in whatever way and said, "Can you just let everyone know before I come back to school? Like, I'm gonna have to miss a couple of days, let them know." And she found that to be the weirdest thing. And all I meant was, I worked for a school that had 3 separate campuses, and I just meant that the teachers that I worked with,
Yeah.
just let them know because
Yeah.
they know. She sent out a school-wide announcement.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
And just, it was so awkward and weird to her
Yeah.
that I was letting people know I was having a miscarriage, that she didn't know what to do with it. And then it did something so strange like that, sending out a school-wide.
Oh my God.
But I remember that was kind of my first door into, people don't know what I'm going through.
Yeah.
I'm alone
People
in
don't
this.
get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Kind of thing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I had a similar thing, not necessarily with work, but we were a part of this fundraising thing for families who were experiencing infertility. It was called the Race to Parenthood. It has since sunsetted, but it was this way to help families. It was a 5K that was really essentially to help families raise money for their fertility treatments. And part of it was, you had to get, I was on the news sharing the story, and, we were all over social media, and I got the same response from some people close to me of like, why would you say that? And why would you say that out loud? And it's like, do we shame people with, when there are other medical conditions? We don't tell people it's weird to share a cancer diagnosis or that they have diabetes or, so why do we make this one? There's so much stigma and shame around it. And but I had that same reception of like, well, that's weird that you're talking about it on the news. So and especially amongst women, you would think that there wouldn't be that layer of awkward.
Right. Yeah. So I remember when we finally, a doctor said to me, we had a wonderful doctor, absolutely loved him. And when we did carry our first baby to term, he even had tears in his eyes when we got past where I had always carried babies to and had a healthy sonogram and all that. So he was fantastic. But he just looked at me one day before that and said, "If you want a child now, I could only recommend adoption. We just don't, you're really unexplained. We don't know why this is happening." And I remember for myself, there was kind of, so many emotions around that. But one of my big emotions in that moment, it didn't last long, I'm going to be honest. But in that moment, it was, I can think about something else now. I can devote my obsession to adoption now. Let's look into that. And we had a good friend who had a similar story. And I remember them say they were a few years ahead of us in their journey. And he said to us, just remember that adoption is not a cure for pregnancy. It's a cure for parenting, but not a cure for pregnancy. And I was so thankful later that I had that prep, that somebody had prepared me for that, because that's just something you can't understand until you're walking it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is powerful.
Yeah.
Oh, I wish someone had said that to me, because it truly is.
Yeah.
Similar to you, there was this relief when we finally made the call that we are not doing any more treatment. But physically, there was a relief for me. But then, like you said, it is not, adoption is not the solution or the cure to infertility. It is another path to parenting. And there is still, that grief that coexists with that joy. Even for me, when we went to the hospital to get Zola, coming into the maternity area and seeing women who had just given birth, and then there was me, and yes, there was so much joy that this perfect little girl was mine. And, I was sitting in the waiting room and the other mothers were sitting in the nursery, and so it's like you said, being prepared that this is kind of solving the parenting problem, but it does not change.
Yeah. And you can't, I don't think there's a cure for that, or I don't think there's anything you can do to prepare yourself, but to at least know that those emotions are going to be there.
Yeah.
And that so they don't shock you when you when you feel that.
Because it can be surprising. And it's hard to, understand it in that moment of
Yeah.
like, but I'm supposed to be happy right now.
Yeah.
So why do I feel sad
Right.
or why do I feel angry or,
Right. And I'll be
Yeah.
honest, when we adopted Isaac when he was 2, and then 6 months later I was pregnant again.
Oh, wow.
And not knowing, I ended up, I did carry her to term, but I was on bed rest for 2 months of the pregnancy, and just very high risk, and all of the things. So that was hard to have a high risk pregnancy with a 2-year-old running around.
Oh,
But I
absolutely.
just remember crying, weeping to my sister one day.
Mhm.
And I said, after adopting Isaac, and just saying, I just want a baby even more now. Like, it did not lessen that desire at all. It almost intensified it, because I wanted him to have a sibling,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and I just wanted that experience so much.
Yeah.
And so
I
again,
get it.
I just, if nothing else comes from this podcast, if people are watching this, for us to say, expect these emotions.
Expect these feelings.
Yes.
Because even
Yeah.
now, Zola is 4, and she has been the joy of our lives. And even still now, if I get a invitation to a baby shower, because I never got to have that,
Right.
because Zola came in the middle of COVID. So
Right.
even when we got
Oh,
our
man,
baby, it
yeah.
didn't look the way we thought.
Right, yeah.
But it still hurts. It still hurts.
Yeah.
And some people struggle to understand, like, well, you have your baby, you have
Yeah,
her.
no.
And I'm like, but it's
yeah.
or even gender reveals or
Yeah.
sonograms, things like that are still really painful for me
Yeah.
to see 4 years later, because I'll never know what Zola looked like in utero. I don't know what it felt like for her to kick. And, we didn't get the opportunity in the early days to celebrate her in the big way that we wanted. And some of that hurt still is there, and it'll come up at times that you're not expecting. And so, like you said, if, folks who are listening, if they get nothing else, just that these feelings continue to show up.
Yeah.
They don't just go away once you bring home your baby or your child. It continues.
The crazy thing that I still experience, and I'm ahead of you in my journey, because my youngest is 16 now. And oldest is 26, and 3 in the middle there. So, but the crazy thing that I still experience is almost a jealousy when I see it so easy for people.
Yeah.
Now, I'm at an age, if I were to be pregnant, God help us all.
I'm like, don't want that.
Yeah, that can't, that should not be happening. But I still, if I hear someone say, well, we're going to, start trying here and have a baby here, my first thought is, you think so? And then when it happens, I have so much jealousy.
Yeah. Yep.
Kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
I think that just some of those things never go away.
They never go away. I get that one. And then also when I hear women who have, carried babies very easily, had healthy pregnancies, easy deliveries, but then talk about the physical changes in their body with a sense of regret. And I'm like, you don't know how lucky you are. I would love to have stretch marks. And, I would love to have evidence that had been nursing. And, and I struggle with that. And, kind of balancing that and saying, but she's also allowed to have those feelings. But that comes up. And like you said, it'll come out at a weird time that I'm like, I shouldn't. Like, what is that? Yeah. And it's learning to like listen to those triggers and those cues and being more curious than kind of shaming yourself about like, well, you shouldn't feel that way. It's really being curious about like, well, what's the why behind that? And like, what am I feeling in this? And
Yeah, it's interesting. So with Sarah, the daughter that I had after Isaac, I may be getting ready to say something ignorant, so I'm not sure. But I kind of think that God made my bonding with her a little bit difficult on purpose, so that I wouldn't have that feeling of, well, everything was great with my biological child. I couldn't nurse her, but was determined to, because that's what you do with biological kids. And eventually the pediatrician had to tell me, like, we're going to have to do something drastic if she doesn't start gaining weight, and like, you're being negligent, and that kind of a little bit threatening to me, kind of thing. She didn't say we're going to call, authorities or whatever, but like being like, we're going to have to intervene if, kind of thing. So I had a horrible time bonding with her because I couldn't feed her. And so each feeding was horrible. Like, I cried through the whole, like, it was awful. And it wasn't until I finally, after she told me that, I was like, I'm going to have to give her a bottle. And this was weeks. Like, this went on for a while. And I didn't bond with her until then. And I just remember thinking and have shared with other adoptive parents, you don't have to, you can bond with your baby.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You can bond. There are ways to bond with your baby, your adopted baby, that are not, biological that
Yeah.
way. And I don't know,
Absolutely.
it might be ignorant to say that, God sent, that's probably dramatic to say,
No. No.
say that. But on this side of things, I'm glad that I had an experience that wasn't so drastically different than my adopted child at that time.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Because,
And I agree. I
yeah.
think God has quite the sense of humor
Right, yeah.
sometimes.
So,
And
yeah.
he sends us little things,
Yeah.
to keep
Yeah.
us on our toes. And I think you're right. That bonding piece
Mm-hmm.
is something I really struggled with because I just didn't know. I didn't know what to do.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
I've shared that with Isaac
Yeah.
before. It's like, you have a child now. Now what do you do?
Now
Like,
what do
you've
you do
tried
with it?
for years to do this.
Yeah.
And it, in some sense, this is a horrible term to say, but I don't know of another way to say it. It feels anticlimactic.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Because it's like, okay, now
yeah, yeah.
Now there's all this buildup.
Yes.
There's all this buildup for months, years. And then it happens and they just send you home. Because Todd and I, when we got to the hospital and they
Yeah.
kind of put us in the car and we were like, oh, they just send us home with and we just take over from here. And I really struggled. Interestingly, my husband bonded quickly and easily. And I did not. I just didn't get it. A lot of it didn't feel natural. Like the skin to skin time and
Right,
things
yeah,
like
yeah.
that. And I'm like, well, I in my mind I was saying, but this isn't my baby. Skin to skin time. They do that with their mom, and I'm not a real mom. I had the narrative of, but I'm not a real mom. Like real moms do that, but I'm not a real mom, so I probably shouldn't do that. And so it was the first few months were really the bonding
Yeah.
was really really challenging.
Yeah.
Not because of her, but because of what I was telling myself.
Well, and
Yeah.
everything that you're saying here is just, it's all leading back to shame and
Absolutely.
guilt.
Yeah.
Like, just like these guilty and, yeah.
Yeah. So much fear and
Yeah.
yeah.